So welcome everybody. It is my honor to introduce today's speaker. We have Dr. Claudia Fernández from the University of Illinois, Chicago. And Dr. Fernández is a clinical assistant professor of Spanish and director of the Spanish Basic Language Program. And she is an expert at task-based language teaching. So we are all very, very excited to be learning from her today. Welcome, Claudia, and thank you so much for being here with us.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I am appalled by the number of people that are here. I hope that I meet your expectations. I'm very happy to be able to talk about something that I try to practice. I was saying Florencia before. It is something that I try to do with my program, have it task-based program, right? Task-based curriculum in the Spanish basic language program that I direct. So it's an honor to be here and to be able to share with you something that I do, right? And something that in which I believe. And my personal goal is for you to, if possible, take something valuable for it, right? And make it better. That will be great, right? So this is not by any means saying that this is the best way to do it, right? But it's at least the best interpretation that I can give, that I can share with you, and that so far has worked for me. So this is the webinar that we are going to start. And what I would like to achieve today is that after you finish with this 1 hour of my presentation, I hope that we are able to identify aspects of instruction that best help learners to accomplish target tasks. And for example, I am just to give the preliminaries, what is the nature and components of a target task, right? We are going to just briefly mention this. What is teaching with a backwards design or a backwards design? And the role and nature of target tasks evaluation criteria, which is something that it is essential in a curriculum based on task. The rationale, the whys, right? And nature of tasks, which is, tasks. So we have target task and tasks, so that may be different. I'm going to explain why I put it that way. And the principles and considerations that I believe that are important to keep, when preparing students to accomplish target tasks. So this is what I hope to accomplish today. And I hope that it serves, is valuable for you as you teach or do the planning that you want to do. So just so I'm sure many of you know what a task-based language teaching is, what is this framework, just so we are in the same page, right? I'm going to just tell you so we have a common understanding. So it's a teaching framework in which the task is the central unit that drives the curriculum. So it is not a grammar point, right? It is not maybe a text or maybe I don't know, a topic, right? It is that there is something that the students do, and this is what is the point of departure that drives the curriculum. That is the principle, right? That is the essential thing that drives the curriculum, the central unit. And also the task-based language teaching is a learner-centered and experiential pedagogical approach with a based on interactionist and sociocultural theory perspectives. And this is because it's learner-centered because students do the tasks, right? It's the students that are, taking care of these. And it is experiential because it is, it comes from the experience of the students, right? The learning happens because they are experiencing something while they do something, right? And it's interactionist because it is rootly, it was rootly perceived, or the vision is that the students learn the language by using the language, interacting with the partners, right? Using the language to do something that requires interaction and that has an outcome. And while they are doing this, the purpose of the teacher is to help to support students while they are doing this task, right? So that's why they have the sociocultural theory, because it involves teachers to have some types of scaffolding, right? Students give them support, but also because as they are nearing the completion of it, as they are ready, right, to do the target task, there is instructional things that need to happen that support students in the accomplishment of their target task. So that's why it has this sociocultural perspective ideas, because, well, we need it means that students have to be supported towards the completion of something. And it focuses on the use of authentic language, because the tasks are a reflection of what people do in the real world. So the task, needs the students to use authentic language, and also authentic linguistic processes. It means that when the students are doing something in the classroom, while doing tasks in the classroom, the cognitive processes that are engaged are the same as the cognitive processes that they may be using outside of the classroom when they are using the language, right? The tasks might be different because the contexts are different, but nevertheless, the same things that happen in the learner's mind are in the classroom, as well as the ones that they are going to be using outside of the classroom. And the students are assessed based on tasks outcomes and not on linguistic outcomes, right? So that means that the students are going to be assessed based on whether or not they completed the task, regardless of what linguistic accuracy, or regardless what is that students are doing with the language. I don't care that much, at least. I don't care what linguistic things they use, maybe, right? Or how accurate it was. My main focus is task completion. And of course, it is, because it's focused on communication, right? That is clear. It is considered a branch of the famous communicative approach. So that is what I mean by task-based language teaching. So what is the nature of a target task? That is another thing that is important to clarify, target task. So a target task is something that students are expected to carry out at the end of a pedagogical sequence of module. So it is the final goal. If those of you who are working with evaluation, you might see this like a summative assessment, right? So something that happens at the end, something that drives the pedagogical sequence, right? That is going to guide our instructional efforts. Yeah. So that is the goal. That is the end. That is what we want to achieve at the end of the week, at the end of 2 weeks, depending on 3 weeks, depending on what time you have and the nature of the task, right? It is something for sure that people do in the real world that involves language. I mean, that is evidently, because making the bed, is something that we do, but does not really engage language or involves language, unless you are, reading instructions to make the bed, but that is not very likely, right? So there are things, that people do outside in the real world that don't involve language, that they are tasks, but the tasks that I'm talking about in the language classroom are tasks that involve the use of language, but there are tasks that people do outside of the classroom. Also, a final task is a task, and there are many ways, right? Of maybe not many ways, but people, have several definitions or characteristics of tasks, But the most common ones, the ones in which everybody seems to agree, is that it has a focus on meaning and communication. That's the number one. A task has a focus on meaning and communication. Students have to understand what they are doing, and students have to interpret something, interact with something, or express something. Also, it involves, as I said, real world processes of language use, a task that does that. There is a gap that needs to be closed. So in order for me to do the task, I need something that I don't have. So I need to go and obtain that, right? I need to close the gap. So there is a gap that needs to be closed when we talk about tasks. And it has a clearly defined purpose that is not linguistic. So the goal is not for students to learn the present tense. That is not the goal. The goal is other thing, to do something, right? So the goal is clear, and it is not a linguistic goal. And the target task might be a bit longer and more complex than a task that we do in the classroom. Because it's something that is maybe more difficult that we do in real life, and it has several components, has several things, mainly things that students need to learn, that takes time to learn in order to accomplish. So it's a bit longer and more complex. So that is a target task. I'm going to give you some examples in a moment. So how do you plan a task-based course? How do you go about it? And some of you, I'm saying many of you, or maybe all of you know already that you have to go backwards, right? In traditional learning context, and I have done it, I did it for many years, is that we knew, what topics or what grammar structures or what content we want students to, or we want to cover, right? Then we practice it in the language, the classroom, and then we had an exam. So it's from the beginning to the end. So in a task-based course, it is different. In a task-based course, you start at the end. So you start thinking, what is that I want my students to do? What is the target task that I want the students to accomplish? What is based, on linguistic, on a linguistic level, proficiency level, interests, based on what students need. I mean, there are many factors, but you need to identify something that students are going to do. And then you have to say, well, how am I going to assess it? How am I going to know that the students really accomplish what they are supposed to be accomplishing, right? How are you going to determine the evidence? And this is done by creating an evaluation tool that we call rubric. So the rubric has criteria that it has intrinsically related to the target task, and that is going to tell you whether or not the students accomplish the task to your criteria, to the criteria that you have devised. It could be different, right? Depending on the target task, depending on the level of the students, depending on what you want to see, right? But you need to have a criteria. And then when you have these two things, then you start planning the experiences and the instructions, that is the tasks that the students are going to do in order for them to be able to do the task at the end. So these planned learning experiences and instructions is what is going to be the heart of this webinar, right? Because these are the things that support the students in the accomplishing of the target task. So let's imagine that you already have your task. You have already know, I want my students to do this, and you already have your rubric. So what's next? Well, next is all the things that you are going to do, and maybe students are going to do by doing homework, right? To support the target task. What is that you are going to do in the classroom, what the students are going to do in the classroom that are going to prepare them to do the target task that you have in mind for them to do? And what is that maybe they can do, maybe by homework or something that is not really something that needs other people, right? But can support these tasks, maybe homework. What is that? What are the instructional things that you are going to do? So you are sure that your students can do something at the end. Now, so there is a purpose here. I put everything in the same family color, as you can see, because everything has to be related. Nothing is there by chance or because, it's there because capriciously I put it there. If you are going to do this task, is because this task one has an intrinsic relationship to this final task. And this activity has an intrinsic relationship to this task, which has, a relationship with this task. So you want to have a coherent module, right? Pedagogical sequence, pedagogical module that every aspect relates, it's relevant to the other aspect, right? And you want to say, well, how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to explain to you in a minute, right? What is the criteria that you are going to follow? So you select, create, modify from your textbook, whatever the tasks that you are going to be useful to prepare your students. Now, I put here the term acceptable evidence in this darker color because, to my view, this is key for this complete coherent sequence or aspects of the unit to work. Because if you have very wonderful tasks, communicative, instructional, meaningful, relevant, and you have your target task that is wonderful, right? And students do it, but what you are going to evaluate does not have anything to do with what you are doing, then everything is lead to failure. Besides, you're going to be very frustrated, and the students are going to hate you because everything you are teaching something that in which you are not going to evaluate it, you know. So, and it is, I have heard it for many, is maybe the one of the things that frustrate us more, you know, as teachers, is that we want to do something like task-based in our classroom, meaningful, you know, communicative, you know, interactional, whatever, but we still have traditional exams, fill in the blanks, you know, and grammar oriented. And it is frustrating because then, you know, there is a mismatch, and you want the students to have a good grades. So you are forced to teach them other things, you know, that are coming in the exam, because otherwise you don't want students to find that they are not learning, right? You don't want that. However, so I'm telling you, however, if you have a rubric that measures what you want to measure, that measures the target task, and is a criteria that I'm going to evaluate A, B, and C, and is in terms of communicative purposes, everything falls into place like a domino effect. Then everything is easy. And I have to tell you, because I have done that in my program, and I didn't have to fight anything. I say, well, this is the criteria for evaluation. My instructors read it, and they knew right away, almost right away, what to do. Because it makes sense, because we say, well, if my students are going to be evaluated this way, well, then I know what to do, right? I know what to focus on. Do I agree with this criteria? Maybe not, but this is what it is, all right? And I need to follow this criteria, because otherwise my students are going to have bad grades, and I don't want that, right? So my suggestion here for you, the wisdom that I can share with you, if I have some, is that among all the battles that we are fighting, because we have a lot of battles to fight, changing the evaluation criteria is, in my opinion, the most important one. If you can achieve that, wow, then you can sit and relax practically, right? So that is what I feel that it is so important to have this thing, this aspect, this component in task-based language teaching, because that anything those in curriculum innovation think that the leading force, the most important force to drive innovation and change is the evaluation tool. Okay, so having said that, I say, well, target tasks are evaluated against criteria. So that means that they are evaluated against each student, right? You are better than the other student. If there's a criteria that is independent of the students, and whatever the student did, I'm going to evaluate against this criteria. So what is the criteria? Could be many things. I'm going to show you an example of my criteria, and then you can find, you know, what is more or less what I do, and then you go from there. But the criteria, the main thing, you know, is task completion. Right? Was the student able to complete the task at least at a minimal level? And this is very vague, I know, but I'm going to give you an analogy. One of the things that you need to know for you to be able to decide what is criteria is you need to know the nature of the target task. What is the target task like, right? What are the components? What is essential to this target task? So I can decide what it is that and is not be, right? What is the task and not be. So imagine that you have to bake a cake. Someone has to bake a cake. Your friend, a birthday cake. That is her task for your friend. So the cake is baked. And then you have to evaluate the cake. You have to assess whether or not it looks like a cake, it tastes like a cake. You have in your mind what a cake is. I think everybody knows what a birthday cake is, right? You have in mind. So in your opinion, what would be the essential characteristics, the essential things that a birthday cake has to have in order to be a birthday cake? What can be extra, or what is it? If you miss this, then it's not a birthday cake. Then it's another thing, but a birthday cake is not. So if you can put in the chat, what do you think? And then I want to give you a tricky question, because it's a question that I always ask and they don't know well, you know. But tell me something that in your mind has to have, a cake has to have that. Otherwise, it's not a cake. What do you think? It has to be what? Florencia, if you have something in the chat that you can.
Yeah, so frosting, candles, sugar, or it has to be sweet, tasty, some kind of a shape. Maybe decorations, maybe fruit flavor. Somebody said.
Okay, fruit flavor, high expectations then, fruit flavor, okay. Okay, so frosting, you know. Yes,
right,
exactly.
a little more specific, right? But yeah, somebody went with like flour, sugar, like the ingredients.
Okay, all right, yes.
Okay, right,
Yeah,
eggs, thank you.
Okay, okay.
Cooked using heat, okay.
Yeah, it's something
not
that
if it's right, if it's uncooked, or I guess if it's an ice cream cake, Lindsay will not accept it. Okay.
Okay, ice cream cake, no.
I'm joking.
So that is
but yeah,
yes,
like
okay. That. So we have an idea, you know, for me, you know, a cake has to be sweet. If I taste it and it's not sweet, then it is an essential thing. You have not made expectations if your cake is salty. I'm sorry, but you the task completion is not completed. You messed up, right? So the criteria you have room, right, to say, right, could be what could be meeting expectations or minimal meeting expectations or strong or exceeding expectations. In my opinion, someone put candles. In my opinion, I would say, well, are candles, you know, part of the thing or not? I mean, is it a birthday cake without candles or not? Is it an essential thing? What about if I have the cake but I don't have candles? Did I meet to what degree I made expectations? Strong, minimal? I didn't meet expectations. This is very important. So my point is that I think in a way we more or less have an idea of the target of the nature of the target task, but sometimes we may not. Maybe none of you or none of us have baked a cake in our life. However, it's something that is done in the real life, and it will be beneficial for the learner to learn how to do it in Spanish or in a second language. Then we will have to look, if we want to put a task, right, we have to look maybe for sources of expertise, right? Maybe we can say, well, maybe I can ask an expert on, maybe I can ask a chef, a pastry chef, and say, well, in your opinion, what a cake is, so I can, I can design the criteria for my students, and I can evaluate them. So I'm gonna go about that in a minute, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what is, the criteria that we use to evaluate the extent to which students completed the task. What is task completion? The cake has to be there. The cake has to be on the table, right? Otherwise, it's not, you have not completed the task. The extent to which you did it, is another story. Okay, so I want to give you an example of the target tasks that I do that my students do in my program. And as I say, they are not perfect. They can be maybe more creative. Maybe they can be, I don't know, better. Maybe you find them boring. I don't know. But this is the task that they do. So as you know, as Francia says, I direct the program. I have 4 sections, 4 courses of Spanish, 60 sections, but 4 courses of Spanish, and I am in charge of the curriculum. And it's Spanish 101, right? And Spanish 101 is first semester, and students more or less, I wish, I hope that my students get into the novice mid-level of proficiency according to ACFO. So what they do, usually they have 6 target tasks per semester. I'm going to give you 3 examples. So one final task is, or target task is, introduce and describe a favorite person to the class, get a prize or give a prize to your classmate based on what they generally do. The most, the most productive one, the one that sleeps the most, the one that is the most, that exercise most, things like that. And explain why and how you want to learn Spanish. That's a task. In Spanish 102, my goal is for students to reach novice high, and they have to design a place to live. They have to organize a weekend for a group of tourists. They have to give a presentation to the ideal neighborhood. In Spanish 103, third semester, there's more or less novice high, strong, hopefully, or intermediate low, so, right? And they have to do a presentation on the most interesting time in history. They have to write a movie plot. They have to predict classmate future. It's an interesting task. This one, very interesting one. I like it. And in Spanish 104, my goal is for students to have intermediate law, but I cannot tell you if I achieve that, unfortunately. I hope that I can tell you someday, right? But they have to write and act out a script of a series of a scene of a TV series. And don't give me a hard time. I know that act out is not interaction. I know that. I am fully aware of that. If it was my will, I would remove that from the whole curriculum because I hate role plays, you know. But there is something about acting and being 20 at UIC that students love. So I said, okay, so I'm going to focus on the positive. They have to write something, that's communication, and let them have fun, you know, and they love that. And the teachers love that, say, well, fine, you know, among all the battles that we have to fight again, I'm gonna let this go. Okay, so let it be. So I'm fully aware. But they also have to design and present an object to solve a daily life problem, which is a fantastic, very creative task, and write a blog about science fiction. They are not the only ones, they have more, but these are just examples. Now, I'm going to focus in this webinar, the example that I have chosen is the one in Spanish 102, give a presentation of the ideal neighborhood for you to see. Is a task, a final task, you know, that we do in Spanish 102 for novice 5 students. So let's see what this task is like. So how would someone, in your opinion, in the real life, describe the neighborhood when you ask them? You know, how would you do that? So in order to say, well, describing a neighborhood, so let's see what people do in real life when asked, how to describe your neighborhood. So I went and I asked my niece, Carolina, we said in Mexico, and I said, I text her and I said, Caro, last week, can you please tell me what your neighborhood is? They want La Colonia, where you do, because in Mexico we say Colonia, where you live, and send me a voice message. Just speak slowly, right? Because it's for a presentation. And she said, sure, I'll do it. So it's just 1 minute and something. So I'm going to give you a model, you know, and see what is that we can, so to have an idea what this task is about. But they have to give a presentation, right? My niece is not presenting, it's just describing, right? Students have to give a presentation. So as you listen, my niece is in Spanish, so for you, those of you who don't listen, I apologize, I'm going to explain a little bit. But she's talking about Tlalpan. Tlalpan is a neighborhood in the city, in Mexico City, and she lives there, and she's describing that neighborhood. So as you listen, identify the linguistic aspects, the topics that she brings, you know, and the organization of her talk, you know, that you think might be necessary to include in your target task evaluation criteria, right? As well as in your classroom activities, because this is what is going to be the goal or a good model of what your students might do, right? Okay, so let's see. Ready?
Mi colonia es el centro de Tlalpan. A mí me encanta vivir aquí porque para mí es la combinación perfecta entre lo moderno de la Ciudad de México y la historia. Tlalpan ha sido un centro cultural y de comercio muy importante, que incluso antes de la época de la colonia ya existía. Parte del encanto que tiene es que mucho de esto se ha preservado. Entonces todavía existe la plaza principal de Tlalpan, que tiene edificios de diferentes épocas, algunos de hace 100 años, algunos de hace 200 o 300, incluso algunos más antiguos, como el mercado. El mercado de Tlalpan es uno de los mercados aún en funcionamiento más antiguos del continente. Al mismo tiempo, en Tlalpan se puede encontrar toda la vida nocturna y el bullicio de la Ciudad de México que es tan característico. Es un lugar muy lindo para pasar un fin de semana en familia. Tiene un lindo kiosco desde donde se ve toda la plaza y el parque y los murales del Palacio Municipal. Y al mismo tiempo también es un gran lugar para salir en la noche con mis amigos, porque siempre hay restaurantes de moda, bares nuevos y una vida social súper activa. Es en serio una joya escondida de la Ciudad de México.
Okay, so this is more or less what people do in real life, you know, when they describe neighborhoods. So what do you think, what did you hear that she did in terms of what language she used, what topics she wrote about, you know, what is the things that can inform you so you know more or less what is the nature of this task. What did she use in terms of, let's say, linguistic? If you pay attention to the linguistics, it's difficult to pay attention to the linguistic things and then the content. But if you remember something, let us know in the chat what words she used, what topics.
Some of the answers so far is there are, descriptive language, adjectives, activities people do in the town, the history of the city, again, local restaurants, a little bit more specific, vocabulary related to the city, her enthusiasm, she's excited to talk about her city, why she loves it, right? Likes to live there. And people keep mentioning history and some descriptions of buildings.
Yes, exactly, or buildings, right? Exactly. So of course, this is a native speaker, right? And with a sophisticated language. And of course, we are not going to, by any means, stretch of the imagination of our students to be able to do that. That would be absolutely impossible. However, that gives us an idea of the nature of the task, right? And things that students still can use, right? Maybe the students are not going to say se puede encontrar because she says, but maybe they can say tiene or I or whatever, right? That is easier. And she used it. It's not that it's not authentic. She used I and she used tiene, right? A lot. She used restaurant, she used vida nocturna, no? These are things that I think are doable, right? So this is just a model that will help you understand the nature of the task, right? And I don't suggest that you just use one model. You may, ask many people, or not many, but 3 or 4, right? And see what aspects are in common. And then it helps to shape what the task is like. Okay, so let's see what happens.
Mi colonia es el centro de Tlalpan.
Okay, so this is a target task of the ideal neighborhood, the one that I present. Imagine that I present to you and say, well, this is a target task. And as you can see, has 3 steps. So it has a structure, right? And it says, you are going to imagine, it's very, very brief, you are going to imagine your ideal neighborhood. These questions may help you think. Write down the answers. What is its name, where it is, what it is like, what is in there, what does it have, what type of people they have. So these are the scaffolding thing, right, that we're talking about. We are not going to say, just think about your ideal neighborhood and tell me what it's like. No, these are some things that might guide you in your thinking. Now you are going to draw a map that explains to the rest of the class, to explain to the rest of the class what your neighborhood is like, right? Your classmates may ask questions. Now we have something like, well, oh, okay. My ideal neighborhood name is Adventures and it's next to the lake. It's a very cool neighborhood. You are going to give an example more or less to see what is that what you expect. And then as a class, you are going to decide which neighborhood is best. So that is the gap. The student has to describe the neighborhood, but the audience has something to do too, because they have to report what is the best, what is their best neighborhood, what is ideal, what is the one that they chose to be the ideal for them, right? So this is, of course, the skeleton, right? And of course, whenever I have this task, I have to write lots of instructions how to implement the task, right? But I just want to give you an idea what is that is asked. Now, the criteria that I follow is that, well, this is just a holistic, it's incomplete, but I just want to focus on some. I don't know if you can see it, but I have, for example, the criteria, several of them, some criterion, and then you have levels of achievement. Exceed expectations, meet expectations strong, meet expectations minimal, and those are the expectations. I know also that there's a debate about exceed expectations. And when I create these 4 years ago, I didn't know about the debate. And if I had to write my rubrics again, I might have, well, meet expectations strong is the maximum,
I don't think there's a debate, Claudia. It's something that I started, so don't feel bad. That's just my issue with exceeds expectations. Now,
I agree with it.
Can you read some of the criteria? Because it's very hard to see.
I will. Okay, I will. I'm going to read the criteria of the respects the intention. Okay, and then I'm going to give you each of them. So it's I mean each of the criteria. So let's see if I can do that. I can't read that. I'm going to I will show you the exceed expectations criteria, which is bigger, and then if you want to go back, we can see the meet expectations and the minimal and the doesn't meet expectations. And I can share everything with the rest of the audience if they want to see it, with more time. So what I wanted to see here is that I have these, these levels of achievement, and I have criteria. So let me show you which one. So the first one is respects the intention. That is the most important one. The cake is a cake, or is an apple pie, right? No, it's gotta be a cake. It's not a banana bread. It's not a pie. It's not high ice cream. It's gotta be a cake. So the student clearly presents an ideal neighborhood, not his family, not his dog, it's an ideal neighborhood. It respects the intention, and it's a presentation. It has a clear map, right? What was requested, and that fits the description, right, of his description, right? Includes all the information from the card, where is name and everything, and nothing is missing, is complete, and the presentation time is the assigned one. So that is the intention, and that is 25% of the notes. If they don't do that, it's going to be difficult. If the task completion is pretty high. Now, the only thing is that respects the characteristic of the genre and the communicative situation, another big one. So uses the informal register to address the audience, because we are in the classroom, right? Of course, at 101, at 102 is fantasy. They don't know about formal or informal, right? So I might just, you may want to just disregard that. That is not really irrelevant. But starts the presentation greeting the audience is important, right? It's for the genre, right? Buenos días. Introduces the neighborhood, mi barrio se llama, does not read from a script, because reading from a script is boring. If I was reading from a script right now, you would be sleeping, right? And voice is clear and loud enough. Closes the presentation appropriately. Eso es todo. Gracias. Presentation is engaged. That's important for a presentation, right? It's a presentation. So this is important. Then we have textual coherence. This, if you want to keep it, fine. If you don't, use appropriate connections to relate sentences such as it and bien, pero. Presentation is organized and logical. That might maybe if you want to put it in respects the characteristics of the genre, is also part of that criteria. Comprehensibility. The presentation is very clear and can be understood even by those not used to non-native speakers. And I use that because it exceeds expectations. However, it's Spanish 102. So I might just say, for this criteria, I might just say the presentation is very clear and can be understood by those used to non-native speakers, right? So that's fine. So it could be, as I said, you can change it according to your needs. And the linguistic resources, I put them, uses vocabulary, lexical expressions, and grammatical things, to describe a neighborhood appropriately. Uses, not accurately, appropriately, uses a variety of words and expressions learned in class. I'm gonna go back in a minute about this. And from para de comunicar boxes, a little box that helps students to do things. And addresses all aspects of the information card in a rich and varied way. None or just a few inaccuracies are present. So in the ideal world of a task-based language, right, at the target task, you want students to use whatever linguistic resources they have, as long as they are the appropriate ones, right? If they are going to describe a neighborhood, well, you might want to use nouns that are part of neighborhoods, right? And adjectives, and you want to say hay and tiene, right? Of course. But the thing is that I really, as long as the respect the intention is met, right? And the criteria and the genre is met, well, they can use whatever they have. Most likely they are gonna have whatever it is that you have done in class with your tasks, most likely. However, I put these, that the ones that you learn in class, and I don't like that to that, but I have to put it because we live in this is the real world. And since students have to go and do their map, at home, and then they have to put it on Blackboard, and then in Blackboard, the teacher presents it, or shows it, and then they have to describe. What they do, the smart students, is that they would write in English the description, they put Google Translate, and then they would have a model, they would have something like my niece, right? Like what my niece said. right? And then nobody understands anything because the students cannot understand what Google says. So I hate to limit that, because I just want them to use whatever it is that they know, right? Whatever linguistic resources, but I have to put, well, show me that at least is your work, right? And I expect something that you learn from class. So that is why I put learn from class. But in the real, in a strict sense of task-based, they use whatever it is that they have, right? Okay, and finally, the reaction, I also put, well, the reaction of the presentations. What are the best 2 neighborhoods? In this case, I say, well, let's just choose 2 neighborhoods because there are 20 students. So I also grade the reaction of the audience, right? So I also grade whether or not you evaluate the cake or not, right? I mean, in that sense, what is your favorite cake, right? So I grade that. So there are some criteria here as well. So it counts what the audience do. Okay. Now, the purpose of all this is to raise students' performance at a level at which they can appropriately, not accurately, appropriately describe neighborhoods based on features they value as positive for neighborhoods to have, right? So that is the instructional purpose of the final task. Okay, now, my question to you: knowing the model, knowing the task, the nature of the task, and knowing the evaluation criteria, imagine that I'm your supervisor. And I said, if you were asked to prepare your students to give a presentation on the ideal neighborhood, what would you do? Where do you start? What is that the most important things that you would focus on based on the evaluation criteria? How do you go about it? Where would you put your instructional efforts? And you have 5 days to do it. 5 days, 5 sessions of 50 minutes. Anything in the chat that you can share?
Find infographics that describe them, I'm assuming neighborhoods, and read them with students, describe the ideal neighborhood, show the ideal neighborhood, vocabulary building, listening practice. Start with activities to build vocabulary related to the city, then branch into actions done in those places and adjectives to describe those places. Go to Google Earth and show and describe, model, description.
Okay.
Yeah, I said do something like reading and listening comprehension on other people describing their neighborhoods, which could be authentic, like your niece. 1 or 2, our students would probably not be able to handle it, but modified.
It has to be modified. Yeah,
yes.
It has to be modified. Okay.
Photos of neighborhood, focus on 3rd-person verbs.
On which verbs?
3rd-person verbs. So
all the verbs.
I don't know. I'm reading.
Okay.
I'm assuming that is to say things like it is, it has, it tiene, parece, the 3rd-person singular, right?
Okay, muy bien. Okay.
Brainstorm ideas about what makes the neighborhood ideal. Photos of neighborhood with modeling the completion task. Completion of the task, excuse me. Show them a difference between 2 different countries and their neighborhoods.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, so yeah, it's lots of modeling. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think they are very good ideas. So remember that, well, I'm gonna say anything, but yeah, I think they are very good ideas. I'm gonna go back to my ideas at the end. So perfect. So I'm gonna tell you, let's see if you and me agree, So one of the things is, what do students need to be able to do the task? What is it? And you are going to focus on that, on nothing and nothing else, because only have five days, and it's a task, and your goal is a task. So identify aspects or components of the final task that are essential. Without them, the presentation is not going to work. So, for example, I have 3 main things. One of them is they have to be able to give a presentation, right? So I would make sure that in these 5 days, at least 1 or 2 presentations at a maybe less complex, level, or maybe they have to at least do some kind of presentation to develop the skill of the presentation, right? Giving presentations is a skill. Well, you don't want to put them, to do the final task. Well, I have never made a cake, and you just want to do a cake. Well, at least let me bake a banana bread, right? Or something, or some cookies, right? Give me something so I can start with the things, right, that I need. Okay, so that would be one that I would do, in my opinion, right? Then, to know aspects of neighborhoods that potentially make them ideal, right, or not. That is, students need to know the topic. Maybe for neighborhoods is not that difficult, although you never know, right? Our students are young, most of them, right? So maybe they don't know that they can be different neighborhoods, that they are neighborhoods that can be ideal, that there is always something that is called urban planning, right? And that neighborhoods are maybe the result of urban planning, that it is a career, that it is something that there is actually things that are said, and there is evidence that shows that they are, that when the neighborhoods have certain characteristics, people live well, and when neighbors have bad characteristics, people do not do well. That is, they need to know the topic, and we cannot assume that they know. And what you say about infographics, the text, that all of that is with the purpose of showing them or helping them to learn the topic, right? Otherwise, how are they going to say, I don't know what ideal neighborhood, I just live, in the suburbs, I don't know what ideal neighborhood is, I guess it's mine, etc. So that is something that we want to make sure in these 5 days that students know or learn. And what target language, you students might need to meet the communicative demands of the task. To meet the communicative demands of the task leads the language. And to acquire, so what I need to create conditions to acquire this language, right? That is called a language class, right? I need to know what am I going to do so students start incorporating in their linguistic system things that they will need for the task. So I call that, because, and I heard it a long time ago, a few years ago in a conference that I went to, like linguistic resources, and I love that. I hate vocabulary, grammar, I hate that. It's linguistic, because these are resources to do something with the language, right? So what are the linguistic resources that the students most likely need? But please do not fall in the trap of having a grammatical agenda. You don't need a grammatical agenda. You just need to say, well, I think that there are certain things that lend themselves good to communicate something, that lend themselves well to communicate something. For example, tiene and I. So when you say third person verbs, I agree with you, but all of them, or only the verbs that you are going to most likely need at Spanish 102, and that will help you tools to communicate what the neighborhood has. So I would say that the tiene es and I, is more than enough, right? Now, if you have your infographics and your tests and your tasks, what is going to happen is that you might not even need to focus on any language, because the language that you use in your text or in your infographics or in the tasks that you're going to do already if they are related to the task, they are going to have things already there that students are going to need to understand and learn. So it's not really necessary, in my opinion, to really know this, right? What is good to know, because you don't want to have texts or materials or activities that are irrelevant, right? You don't want that. You want linguistically relevant. You want linguistically relevant things to do the task. That is what you want. If you are going to focus on what is that the type of language that the students are going to learn. What I have said, if you are using tasks in your classroom that relate to the target task, it is there, right? It is there already. Okay, perfect. That is for me the 3 things that I would focus on. Now, okay, I don't know if you're gonna see that, but let me just, this is just the only thing that that's the slide that is like that. The other ones are easy to read. But this is the first task, and I just wanna maybe describe to you. But my purpose here is that this is the first task that is called my favorite neighborhood. Now, as well as you start your pedagogical sequence with the end in mind, right? You start your task in the classroom with the end in mind too. So I want to create this task, and this task is the students are going to look at the photo, right, a drawing, and they are going to have a real or fictional neighborhood where several services are and establishments are depicted, and I have 8 or 9 steps. You know, I'm going to explain to you in a minute what it's about. But I want to know the purpose of this task, and the purpose of this task, not target task, the task that I'm going to do in the in the classroom to support the target task, is to describe your favorite neighborhood in the place you live. You can also say describe your neighborhood. The thing that happens in Chicago, for example, is the most segregated city, or one of the most segregated in Chicago. And I don't want students to maybe have a difficult time saying, well, my neighborhood is not really one that I want to describe, right? Fine. So just describe the favorite neighborhood in the place that you live, or describe a neighborhood that you like, right? That you know and you like, etc. You can change things according to your context. But that is the purpose of my task today in my class. And then I go backwards. So how am I going to, what can I do so students are able to describe or their favorite neighborhood? So I say, well, students can look at a drawing, right? And where several services and establishments are depicted. They have a list of some of these services, like the words, and they have to match, right? Well, see this map, and they have this vocabulary, these words, right? And just match, you connect, the form with the meaning, right? Then they need to add other services or establishments that they see, but they are not in the list. So when they are doing that, they are gonna say, well, what does parada de autobús mean? I don't know. So teacher, what does parada de autobús mean? Okay, so what do you think? And then you start helping them to create this vocabulary that they know, that they need, right? Little by little, by need, right? Now, then they say, well, then they have to add other services, number 3, and establishments, right? That they are not in the list. And teacher helps providing the vocabulary they need. Then they write down whether or not they would like to live there in that neighborhood for the photograph. And would you like to live in this neighborhood? That is a question, right? No, I have models. No, there aren't any parking lots, right? Or yes, it has many services, for example. And they might ask, how do you say any? How do you say? So you start, helping them to create and say, well, do you like to live in this neighborhood or not? And in pairs, they share what they wrote, right? So teacher provides some conversational gambit. So yo para mí, me gustaría vivir, or yeah, me too, or whatever it is that they need to have the conversation. It's just maybe 30 seconds, I don't know. Now students think about their favorite neighborhood and write a few characteristics, and teacher may activate some schema, right? Well, let's talk about the characteristics of the neighborhoods in Chicago. They are very good neighborhoods in Chicago. Do you like some of them? What do they have? So choose one and write a few characteristics. And they are going to ask you maybe for things that they are not in the list, right? But that they are in their ideal neighborhood. And then you are going to tell them, or writing, and they are going to write it down, and they are start building the vocabulary of their needs, right? Because for them, the neighborhood in Chicago that they like maybe is similar to the ideal neighborhood that they are going to present in the final task. But some textbooks stop there. Fine. Vocabulary, we already learned the vocabulary, and that's fine. Next activity. What's the purpose of this? What's the purpose of doing that? Then, what you're going to do is to share information with their partners, right? So, and did they choose the same neighborhood? Are their neighborhoods similar or different? Some write it down, right? So for example, my partner's neighborhood is X, right? Whatever, and mine is Y. They are very different. X has lots of parking lots and mine has lots of parks, for example, right? There's something similar, something brief that they can write, right? And then what happens with that information? What are we going to do with this? We'll elicit the information from the group and list on the blackboard or whiteboard their choice of neighborhoods to see which one is the most popular. Maybe, we have a most popular, right? As the class, Why? Why do you think? Why do you like this? I mean, 7 students chose this neighborhood. Why? Why do you think it's popular? Why do you like it? And then students are going to tell you things. You write it on the blackboard, and then we start creating these things, that they need for the final task. And then the purpose is to find out what is our favorite neighborhood in Chicago. That is the purpose of the task. My purpose was not vocabulary. My purpose is I want to learn what is the choice of neighborhoods in Chicago that my classmates and that my students like. And that might reveal something about who we are, might reveal something about our values, might start thinking, well, in this classroom, people really have a lot of cars because they all love, neighborhoods that have parking lots, for example, right? So my point here is that we have activities in our textbooks, but most of the times they fall short. They finish short. And I want always to say, what is the purpose? What is the communicative purpose? What is the meaningful purpose of doing that? There must be a purpose. If not, you have to find it, because we're not just chatting for the sake of chatting. There is a final goal that relates to the target task. There is another one here, for example. The goal is to identify, describe, and present, to the class the neighborhood we would like to live in, for example. It's similar, right? So here we have 3 neighborhoods from Bogota, for example. Someone already had the idea in the chat, and 3 persons who live in them, right? So they have the description of the neighborhood and the description of the people. And first, raise the description, and then the profile of this person, and then where do you think each person lives? So it's an interpretation activity. They are going to read the descriptions, and they have a purpose to read this description because they have to match with the person that most likely live there, depending on the profile. Select the neighborhood you would like to live in, where you want to live, and give 3 reasons. It could be one of the neighborhoods of Bogota. So that is true. That is very, very cool. Or it could be another neighborhood, right? Share it with a partner, and then you have something in common. Think about a neighborhood you would like to live and write a brief description. What would be a good neighborhood for me to like? And then either teacher or professor, how do you say this? Okay, this is banco or bank, whatever, right? And then you are going to present it to the class briefly, 1 or 2 sentences, And what is the class going to do? Well, the class selects the neighborhood that is the coolest, this is a very good, nice neighborhood, what you describe. So they say, well, and the purpose is, well, what is the neighborhood that it is the most likable in this class, right? What does it have? When I did these tasks, some are so similar, my students said that a good neighborhood would have a baseball arena field, Okay, fine. I live in a neighborhood that has a baseball stadium, right? Interesting. So everything could be, so in every class, there's something different because it's what students want to do. Another task that I can show you is one that I just read in the Florencia and Mirini's book, Common Ground, and I loved it. And this is a task that is fantastic for these target tasks. So select the best neighborhoods based on aspect and description. So what is the students have to do is one student describes a neighborhood and the partner draws it. And then they show them in a gallery, so they have, the description, and then it's an interaction task. I need to tell you, and you need to draw, and we're going to put it together, and then you put it in the class if this, and then you put it with, and the students have to, walk around the classroom and select their favorites, right? So that is something that is very cool. It's an interaction class, interactional activity, interactional task, and I think and I can wait to do it, right? I think it was a very good activity. So that lends itself well. Why? Because they need to draw a map, right? They need to draw a map for their presentation. So this activity, this task might help them to do that. Okay, so as you can see, this is just examples of tasks. This is not something that you have to follow, very strictly, but it gives you an idea. And the most important thing is that there's always a goal that is not linguistic. That is not just to practice vocabulary or to practice or to do something for the sake of doing something, right? That is important. And second is something that students are going to use, or they're going to, is something that helps students to do the target task. Now, I give you some recommendations. The first one is that once the target task is designed or identified, you already know what the target task is, the nature, the structure, the materials, the models, whatever implementation, design your evaluation rubric. That's the second step. And then identify classroom tasks that you can adapt from your textbook. Is possible. Sometimes it's impossible. I have tried and it's impossible sometimes, but sometimes it's possible, or create your own. So textbooks, for example, have activities, right? And the activity usually is to practice a grammar form. But you can go beyond that, of vocabulary. You can maybe add 2 or 3 steps, or 1 or 2 steps, that in which you identify a possible purpose of doing this grammatical activity. You have it. I mean, I'm saying that because it's what we have, right? We have these things that my textbook, for example, has things that algunos, ninguno, buenos, pocos, whatever, right? And which is, which is a language that the students need. However, it doesn't give me the purpose of doing algunos, ninguno. It's just to practice algunos, ninguno, muchos. So I need to add 1 step more and find what's the purpose of doing that. I need to find something. It's not just that I'm just, oh, fantastic, great, let's move to the next task. No, we need to have a purpose because we are in the classroom. Otherwise, what's the purpose of being in the classroom if it's not to learn about each other, to learn about the community, to learn about our cities, to learn about the world, to learn about something, right? There must be activity. The classroom's activities, in my view, need to have the participation of the group in order for them to be done. Otherwise, they are just individual activities, right? And you don't have to be in the classroom to do them. You can do it, at home. So if we are in the context of the classroom, let's create tasks that need, right, the group or a partner or something. Otherwise, why to be in the group? To get to know each other, etc. Things that create that exploit, right, the context of the classroom. And we can do many things in the context. It's a limited context, but it doesn't mean necessarily that it's not rich context, a rich context. Okay, so what about activities that support tasks? Remember that I put activities, right? Not tasks, but activities. So something that we usually do for homework, for example, right? So, and I call them activities. I think Bill Van Patten called them activities too, when they are not tasks. Why? What is the difference? Well, activities are different from the way I understand from tasks, in the sense that they do not necessarily have a goal that goes beyond the intrinsic goal of the activity. That is, the goal of the activity is not necessarily to find out what is the most popular neighborhood in the class, right? Or who wrote or who drew the best map, right? Or who lives in the coolest neighborhood. This is not, the activities don't have that aspect or that characteristic. They fall only on what the activity is made for. They usually do not need a partner or a group of people to be completed. You can do an activity alone in your house, right, in your home. However, activities can, in my opinion, that support tasks can be valuable as long as they are meaningful. The thing that happens is that we are not used to see them very often in the real life, right, in our textbooks. So one of the things that activities can help, for example, is to promote memorization. Memorization, I mean, vocabulary is something that we need to learn, right? And we need to memorize. And your students and learners are not going to memorize, they're not going to learn a word by just being exposed once or twice to it, right? According to research, they need to be exposed between 8 and 10 times to each word in order for it to stick in their mind, to be acquired. So the homework can be a very good, like these activities can be, if they are well designed, can be a very good tool to help students memorize things, right? Memorize vocabulary, be exposed to vocabulary, and and learn it. That is like with Quizlets or whatever. There are many things that they promote memorization. It's important. I'm learning Catalan now. Oh my goodness, it's just, I can see the word. Oh, I've seen this word before, but I don't know what it means. I need to see it again. And I see it like 15 times. And this, I mean, maybe you're gonna say, Claudia, you're older. Yes, I'm older, but still, it's not that easy to learn. Also, the activities can be activities very important to strengthen form-meaning connections, which is very important. So you can have, for example, structure input activities in which students have to pay attention to the target forms, to tener, to tiene, to hay, for example, to algunos, muchos, whatever is a target form that is essential for students to use in their presentation, and help them promote, the form-meaning connections that are essential for acquisition. That is something that you can do in the homework. You just need to learn how to do them well. And activities also can develop interpretation and expression skills. You can have a reading activity, right? You can have one of the infographics or one description, of a neighborhood, and have students answer some questions to interpret, and to maybe react to something. This is something that you can do alone, and this is very valuable, right? Students need these massive amounts of input. Massive. When I say massive, I'm not kidding. It's massive. I mean, I say massive. So the homework can be, I'm most in 101, 102, when they are basic. The homework can be a very good source of support for the language and the skills that they need. So I would say, well, just the thing that it has to be well done. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt very briefly, just to let you know, we have only 20 minutes left. And there are several good questions in the chat that I'm hoping that we can get to.
Thank you. I am going to finish. Yes, I think I am going to finish right now, I think. So some things to keep in mind. Good timing, I think. Oh, I think I can do well. So both just the final things. So one thing to keep in mind with this type of task-based preparation is that both instructors and students have to know the nature of the task and the evaluation criteria before starting the new BAS task module. So when you start, you have, the goal is to describe and to present the ideal neighborhood, and this is the evaluation criteria I'm gonna use to evaluate your task. This has to be known beforehand, at the beginning of the module, by everyone. Task must be related to the target task in one way or another. You cannot have tasks in the classroom that don't have any relevance to the target task, right? Unless you have plenty of time, but this is not something that we have, right? And so this has to be relevant. Tasks should be relevant to students' communicative needs and interests too, right? I think that is important, right? I'm not going to create a task that maybe they don't really find interesting. It's something that you know because you know your students. The first task, or the first ones, should be designed to give students a glimpse of the target task. So if it's a presentation of ideal neighborhood, they need to have someone present or describe something, give a glimpse of what the target task is like. The sequence of the tasks is based, how am I going to sequence, right? What comes first and what comes next, It's a very difficult question in TVLT, right? Very difficult, nobody knows. However, the task sequence is based on complexity rather than linguistic difficulty. So you might think, well, tiene, or it's an irregular verb, it is cambia de raíz, whatever, oh, this is going to be at the last, because it's very difficult, I want to put at the last. It's not about linguistic complexity, it's about task complexity. A task that involves interpretation is less complex, right, than a task that involves maybe comparisons or production, without any support. So treat grammar and vocabulary as linguistic resources to task accomplishment and not the end goal. That doesn't work that way. And activities should be designed with the target task goal in mind always, the activities for the homework. And finally, my best advice is expect effective communication and not linguistic accuracy. Okay, many thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Claudia. We have some great questions. I'm going to ask the last one that was asked because it's related to one of the bullet points that you had there. How many target tasks are ideal in one semester, or how many do you do in one semester?
We have 6 in one semester. Yeah, 6. And we have
Is it 16 weeks?
It's 16 weeks. I mean,
Okay.
it's 16 weeks a semester, and we have 6. So it's more. We have about 2 weeks to prepare for one target task. So we have six. Yeah.
Okay. So 2 weeks preparation. And
Target
then,
task. 2 week preparation, target task. 2 week preparation, target task. But we also have exams, tests. You know that they are with 3 tests. You know, proficiency-based tests. So they take one session, right? One class
okay.
session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So one question was if you could say a little bit more about what activities you do or what you do in general to help them with the vocabulary that the students will need.
Okay, so that is a great question. So I have developed for homework Quizlets. I don't know if you know what a Quizlet is. Florence sure is here the expert. But the Quizlets is some cards, you know, that you can create, and they are digital and help the students to memorize. You can create chunks of language like tiene, I don't know, algunos edificios, for example, if that is meaningful, or your edificios. So students can memorize the vocabulary in that way. I prefer to give vocabulary in chunks, right, than in isolated words, at least at this level, but you can play with that. That is for homework. Also for homework, well, there are several other activities like matching, you know, the image with the word, you know, have once fill in the blanks, but I usually don't want to fill the blank with the target word, but they have to read the target word in order to select what is, you know, what is next, you know. So they have to process the target form, right, in order to fill in the blank. So it's not a production task, it's an interpretation task in that way. What they have to produce is based on the thing that they read. So these are these things that I do. There are many other ones that you can use. Now in the classroom, what happens is that, well, I create my task, right? Like my task that has a goal, and the vocabulary is being built. You might not believe me, but that's how it happens. The vocabulary is built as they are doing the task. So if they have to, as I said, read an infographic and they have to do something of interpretation, they interpret, but they might have questions about vocabulary. And then, well, I give them the question. I can give them in English, or I can explain, or I can give examples, right? What is those, I don't know, what those a parada autobús is? Well, I can just maybe draw it, right? Or I can say, oh, what do those carros mean? Well, it's Volvo, Volkswagen, you know. So there are several strategies, but my point is that it's really not that important to first focus on vocabulary and then do the task. The vocabulary is being learned as they are doing the task. They are going to have questions, but you continue, right? You continue with the task. And you provide the vocabulary that they need, but it is through doing the task. Try it, and you'll see for yourself if it works. You don't need to have, well, let's begin with 20 words before.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Another question was about whether you use the target language or you switch to English or the shared language when you are explaining the task or giving instructions related to the task. I know you are a very big proponent of using the target language, so I can anticipate that answer, but what do you do?
Yeah, well, yes, I am a big proponent of using the target language in the classroom as much as possible. If I could use it 100%, I will use it 100%. However, I'm not that crazy. What happens is that when my students are sent the evaluation criteria, you know, and they are also they know what the target task is like. The instructors, and what we do is every time that we do something in the classroom, we say, remember what we are doing this, remember, because we remember that in 2 weeks we're going to describe a neighborhood. So it's important that we are doing this so you can describe. So they are always, almost every day, make a reference to the target task. So in their mind, the task is relevant. So they know more or less, you know, what is going on. However, what I do is that although I don't want to communicate in English in the classroom, that doesn't mean that I don't communicate in English at all, right? So what I do is that I create a small paragraph with instructions in English that the students are sent via email, or they are put in Blackboard for the students to read, and they know what is going to be the task like tomorrow, for example, right? So they say, well, remember that we're going to describe a neighborhood. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. So instructors send this in English, so students know how it's going to be the implementation like in English, so they know. So yeah, I am a big proponent of not using Spanish in the classroom, but in English sometimes outside the classroom is important. Yeah, and it's clearer.
Okay, very good, thank you. Another question was more specific to asynchronous online classes. Mm-hmm. What types of activities will support tasks in an asynchronous online class?
Very similar to the ones that I just mentioned. It's just that you just change the online to the online format. Yeah, you just implement them in a way that it is not in the classroom, but it is very similar. You have the goal. Today we're going to learn about what is the neighborhood that we like in Chicago, right, the most, and we do that activity, and maybe instead of having maybe a wall, maybe we have a Google Doc, and they share things for everybody. So I would say that they are very similar. It's just that you just have to implement them in a way that it to the digital context, but the principles are there. And I'm telling you that because imagine when we have to go online, and I had so many tasks already. So it was not as difficult to put everything online. We did almost, the same thing.
Right. I would say if it's an asynchronous class, fully asynchronous, never meet in Zoom and collaborate together, then you do need a little bit. We have a lot of asynchronous classes. You do have to plan ahead a little bit more and create a lot of the content ahead of time. So I create a lot of the videos. So if I'm describing something, I'm describing and marking on the screen, and there's activities they have to do with that. And then another video where they do that. So you have to create a lot of that ahead of time. That's the biggest difference. Whereas if you're in class or even in Zoom, then everybody pitches in. And what do you see here? All of that is lost in an asynchronous class. So you have to do it yourself, and then think of a way that you could do a computer graded, where they were sort of held accountable for watching that. It's a different
I miss the asynchronous thing. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, it's a different rhythm. It just requires a little bit of adaptation. Okay, lots more questions. Let's see. It looks like each task-based module has only one target task and is presentational. Is it always presentational?
No, not always.
Okay.
Interesting. It could be, for example, an interview, and the interview is part of the task, and then of course you have to do something with the interview. So usually you write a report of the interview, for example. But the interview is the interaction, right? So the interaction is also have to be interview. There is interaction as well. What students do is they record their interaction in their phones, and they send it to the professor. I think what they do, they go to Blackboard, and then there is assignment in Blackboard where they can upload their recording, and that interaction is evaluated with a rubric, right? Okay. But of course, there's always another thing. So no, not always are presentationals. They are interaction and writing, right? Presentational writing, presentational oral, and so yeah. Okay. And activities that need to read, and then you have to do something with the reading, of course.
Sure. And then just a confirmation, if what you call an activity, is that the same as an exercise, a grammar or vocabulary exercise, as it is known outside?
It could be an exercise. The thing that happens is that sometimes exercises are not meaningful, are drills, right? So you can call them exercises if you want, as long as you can call whatever you want, but the thing is that they need to be meaningful. I mean, you need to make sure that there's meaning involved, right? So it could be an activity. For me, maybe it's a little more complex, I don't know, but I have gone through this route, and it's like a rabbit hole. I don't know if it's happened to you. You never know. There's a point in which there is like gray areas in which it could be an exercise, it could be an activity. So just you can say, well, activity, exercise, whatever it is, but it has to be meaningful. That's for sure. The student has to know what's going on.
There was a question related to your assessments. So you talked about a lot about the tasks, and many of the ideas you share were the presentational tasks. And then now you just mentioned that there are also interpersonal tasks, and they're also assessed. So they also get a grade for those. Do you also have pen and paper exams, or have you moved completely away from pen and paper exams?
We have pen and paper exams.
Okay.
The thing that happens is that they are proficiency-based exams. What it means is that the only thing that the students have, not the only thing, well, the students, it's big things, but students have to show that they can either interpret something, that they can interact with someone, or they can present something. So the exams, usually there are 3, and what I want to know with these exams is whether or not students have proficiency, right? Whether or not they can comprehend a text that is written or oral, right? Whether they can write something, or whether they can interact orally with someone. So the test usually have 2 parts, you know. One is interpretation, and another one could be expression or interaction. And they are like half an hour.
Okay. Very good. More questions. You have lots of questions, Claudia. I'm
It's
hoping
okay.
we can get to as many
break.
as possible. Okay. So you mentioned something about the para comunicar box in one of your slides. Can you explain briefly what that refers to?
Yeah, it is something that you know, the textbook does, and it's okay. I agree with that. We have a task, right? And then you know, the scaffolding thing, right? So what it happens is that because it's Spanish 102 and it is so many things, so the students have this. I should have put it in there. I thought about putting it in the task, and then I didn't do. So they have like a little box in which they can say, well, you can use the following examples. So algunos edificios, muchas casas, tiene bares y hay. So they are some things that help the student to use the language, right? They are just examples that they can do. So this is, and that is called para comunicar, and it is something that I use in the evaluation too, because, well, it is something that is there for you to use it.
Right. Okay. Another question: how do you maximize students' practice time in class during the presentations? Are they presenting in front of the class while everybody else is watching and writing questions, or are they presenting in small groups during class? Is this recorded? Can you tell us logistically how all of these presentations work?
For the target task, I guess, right?
Right. So the target task,
Okay.
they describe the ideal neighborhood, and then they have to say which one they like, right? So is this
Yes.
happening live in class, or is this
Yes,
recorded?
it's a live in class. It's a live in class. So what is that? We ask students to draw their map and the night before, right, or before, put it in Blackboard, and the teacher has, you know, the map already there. So when this is the student's time to present, the original activity is in pairs, you know, and I don't know why I changed it to just one person. Could be in pairs too, and then you save time. But then, you know, each student goes to this in front of the class and has the image of their map and starts presenting, and the audience is taking, you know, notes, or no notes, but just maybe they have like some instructors put like a little thing, you know, table in which they give some 5, 4, 3, 1, 2, whatever, you know, and have space to put why, right? And then, you know, so it's like, imagine how long it can take. It's just Spanish 102, so it might take what, 30 seconds?
Okay, we're
seconds.
talking about
Yes.
really short presentations.
Yes, because, you know, I mean, it's
Okay.
Spanish, you know what I mean? So of course, you know, I mean, so imagine, so if a native speaker takes 1 minute to give a presentation, imagine what, you know, someone 102, well, it's just 30 seconds, right? I don't know how long. I mean, it's not really that long that they can say. Remember, it's not that much. But you say, well, 5, 6 sessions for 30 minutes. Well, yes, that's the way it goes. Yes.
And how many students do you have in an
20.
average? 20. 20.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So about in 25 minutes, let's say, everybody has presented.
Yes, in 50 minutes, yes. 50
Okay.
minutes, yes, everywhere. So I designed 1 full day for the target task.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Another question, do you have any suggestions for more advanced classes, for literature, culture classes, maybe AP, you know, students doing their major or minor in the language, so the more advanced classes beyond the 4th semester? Any ideas or suggestions for potential tasks?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, that is, I mean, I don't have ideas right now in my mind, but it is, I mean, that a task-based approach is not only for language. It is actually one of the best practices, as far as I know, for you know, course design, right? You start always, what is that I want my students to learn, and then you go from there. So yes, it can be for literature, it can be for culture, for even for grammar. I am, you know, teaching advanced grammar right now, and I'm trying to follow that. So yeah, it's possible, and there is plenty of literature of backwards design and task-based language, I mean, task-based teaching. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Claudia. You're getting a lot of thank yous. I do have one question, because it's something that I don't know myself and I always struggle with. And Graciana made a comment and I was like, yes, I relate to that. How do you know when you have done enough activities? How do you know when you're like, this is enough activities, now we're ready for more output? How do you know, output, Claudia?
Okay, for more output or for ready for the final task? For more output, they are ready to
let's say an output-based task.
Okay. Well, it's, I mean, I don't know if I have the right answer, but the thing is that you are monitoring the students and you say, well, we're going to produce a little bit today, right? And then a little bit more tomorrow, and a little bit more tomorrow. And there is something that is called exit task, you know, and in TVLT, that it is something that that measures how prepared they are for the final task. So you can have like a mini task, I don't know, 2 days before, you know, or the day before the final task. I have an instructor that always comes to me and say, oh, I already did the final task, something similar, right? So it means that she's preparing the student for the final task from day one, right? So it might be that they have to produce maybe just three characteristics of an ideal neighborhood. Tell me that, and then tomorrow or the next is, okay, so now you're going to give me the good things and the bad things of the neighborhood. And then so you are asking the tasks that you do is they are asking more and more to produce, but it is little by little. This is one thing that I would do. Of course, you know, you never see, as you know, as everybody knows, you just create, you facilitate the conditions for learning, but nothing is for sure, right?
That's the frustrating part.
You know, I don't know. I mean, I do my best, you know, and we'll see.
And that's one thing, going back to the comment about asynchronous online classes, that is the big question, because everything is pre-planned. And how do you know when it's enough versus, no, I should add a few more things? Yes, it's always a struggle. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we are all out of time. Thank you so much, Claudia. You're getting a lot of thank yous. Fantastic presentation.
Thank you very much.
Very informative and inspiring. So thank you all very much. We have another webinar on April 12th on diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you go to our site, the Downstate Illinois, I'll copy here our link. So if you go to our site and then go to events, you're going to find it there. So join us on April 12th for another free webinar to learn about a new open educational resource site that is all about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So thank you all very much for being here. Oh, if you are an Illinois teacher and you need PD hours,
I have it in my slides.
Yes, that's okay. That's okay. If you are only K-12 Illinois teachers, if that's not you, you're free to go. Thank you for being here. But if you are an Illinois K-12 teacher and you would like to have PD hours, please fill out this form right there. I'm putting the Google Doc, the Google form. And just fill that out, and then you will get your PD hours. Again, only Illinois K-12 teachers. All right, thank you everybody for being here.
Thank you, Florencia. Gracias. It was a pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.